What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to take a look at the Silent Hill F review scores. They finally dropped. Look, we knew that DualShockers would give it a 9.5, but what about everybody else? Actually, some of these were leaking, like last night. Sites just didn't care anymore, and we're just giving out 9s and 8s and just not caring, I guess, about the review embargo. But we have the overall score, which is at an 85, which I think is phenomenal. We'll talk about that in a second, but 85 based off, I believe, like 72 sites have done it. And the PS5 on Metacritic. And you got a range. You definitely have a range. But I would say the most often number or repeating number is 9. I think 9 is a lot of this. 9s and 8s. There's a lot of 8 out of 10s. And then you actually have some lower scores that bring it down. Thank God for the 9s to keep it up there. But you got a 73, 3 7s, and IGN and Push Square actually both 7s. And then you have Tech Radar giving it a 6. You still have a couple, The Verge, Polygon, and CNET that haven't given it scores, although CNET says like they're severely disappointed by it, so that's not going to be a good score. But overall, I would say an 85, and we talked about this. I actually made I think a YouTube short video on Silent Hill and the review score predictions that I had. And if you look at it, Silent Hill has had a pretty big range. You know, if you can get in the mid-80s, you are in like the top 3, just in terms of the score. You know, look, we're all going to get to play it very, very soon, and we can all form our own opinions, and that's probably what we should do. But, you know, just to go based off the numbers, this puts it, I think, like top 2, top 3 in the entire franchise. So, you know, Silent Hill 2 Remake was also top in the franchise as well, or one of the top ones, just because most Silent Hill games gets below an 80, maybe even gets below a 70, depending on which Silent Hill game you're talking about. So, especially recently, right, the last like 15 years. So, this one's, I would say, really, really good. And then, okay, well, what are people saying? Well, look, there's kind of groups. Like you can look at the 10, 9.5, and 9 groups and see a similar theme. And then you can scroll down and you can look at the 8s and 7s, that group, and you can see a different theme. It does seem like there is one theme that kind of is throughout all of these, which is the story. The story, the writing, the characters. There's twists that some of them have kind of hinted at, maybe like a mid-game twist. I've seen people talk about the second half of the game is insanely strong. That's the strength of the game, it seems like, no matter who you're reading it from. If it's a 6, if it's a 7, if it's a 10, it's the story. It's the story, writing, it's the themes. The higher scores talked about like the environment and, you know, the setting, but I don't really see that as much from the lower ones. But yeah, that is the main takeaway. Now, again, the lower sites, or the lower scored sites, I should say, I saw more often talked about the first half is slower. It doesn't put its best foot forward, is a lot of the quotes that I saw. But then the second half is much, much, much better. Again, even from a story perspective. So, look, that is one thing that I think you got to get right, you know, in a modern Silent Hill game. And that's just, you know, visually with our own eyes. You look at this game and we've isolated probably where it can succeed and where there might be some problems, which, let's be real, was the gameplay. I think a lot of people were pretty skeptical and 50-50, and I was higher than most, but I mean, that was the area of concern, was the gameplay. The area of not concern was the story, I really think, leading into this thing. So that seems to have come true. You know, that was the strongest element of the game. I saw a lot of good things about the visuals. I saw a lot of good things about the music. And speaking, actually going back to visuals, so not just like, oh, it looks pretty. I saw a lot of people talking about like the way they do visuals to get something out of you, you know, to like get an emotion, and the kind of gruesome and almost disturbing visuals that they do. That's what I'm talking about, and that's exciting. That kind of follows through Silent Hill, right? Kind of using that art medium, right, to convey something to you rather than just always saying it. And Silent Hill has always kind of been good at, like, they'll tell you some stuff, but generally, and that's the same thing here that I've seen in these reviews, like the journal is very important, the journal is very good, and the story is very good, but it's not gonna hold your hand. You know, you have to think, and it's gonna, you know, and even the puzzles is an element. I guess that kind of goes into gameplay, but puzzle in terms of how that connects to the story and the themes and stuff like that, that seems to be strong. Now, the one one thing in terms of visuals and performance and audio and stuff, I did see people talking about, number one, the PS5 Pro again. That's becoming a problem for some reason. And then number two, I did see a couple, even the higher score. Actually, I think I saw like 9.5s talking about, yeah, there were some bugs and some, like technical things here and there, but like that aside, it's a 9.5. And I think like in the world that we're in with like we just did Borderlands, right? A game that many people would say is really good and maybe the best Borderlands game we've gotten, but then the performance makes it perhaps the worst one, right? So we're kind of in this era of, you can't really just push those things. I mean, you do have to say it, and they are saying it in the review, so I guess I can appreciate that, but like how serious are we talking here? It doesn't sound as serious, okay, to be fair. But yet again, those Borderlands scores were like, yeah, there's performance stuff, but that aside, it's a 9.5. People can't play the freaking thing. So, sometimes I think journalists, maybe because of the developer or publisher, sometimes they don't focus on performance as much as I think they should. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think it's going to go okay. I don't have a PS5 Pro, so I guess maybe I don't have that problem. But just to keep in mind, I did see stuff about the technical side of this game. Okay, and then there's the gameplay. We'll get that really fast, and I guess the puzzles, like I said. So the puzzles, again, from like the themes and the story, stuff like that, saw a lot of positivity. I did see, depending on which review I read and which score I read, the lower you go, the more that they said the puzzles were kind of 50-50. There's some good, some bad. The higher ones just praised it entirely. Didn't talk about any bad puzzles. So that's cool. I've never been a huge puzzle guy, like in any games. I can tolerate them. I can kind of see them for what they're worth, I guess. Look, that's probably my least interested area in any game, let alone I know it's such an important feature of Silent Hill games. I can do it. Puzzles are actually pretty darn cool in Silent Hill games. I got to give them that. So I'm not really worried about that. And then, okay, the combat. Look, it's kind of like a cop-out, a thing that I've been saying this entire video. It really depends on which review and how high and how low you're going. Higher you go, the higher scores, they talk about that it's really good. The middle scores, like the 8s and 8.5s, talk about how the combat's like okay or maybe even not okay, but it doesn't hold back the rest of the game from being amazing, right? So you have those kind of tiers. And the lower tiers, put more stock on the gameplay and say, look, it's just flat out not good. I don't like it. And therefore, like, the score is lower. It really feels like it's a game that, and this is something we talked about leading into it, I actually think some people are going to really, really like it. I think I might really like it just because I've kind of told myself that. I've been very honest since the beginning. When I've looked at the gameplay, I've thought it's kind of looked cool. I guess the thing that you might be able to take some sort of like solace in, because I've seen a lot of people talk about like, well, the gameplay just doesn't look for me, but it also looks like it might break almost like the atmosphere. I didn't really see that from anybody, right? It's almost all separate. So it's like you either love the gameplay, it's serviceable, or it doesn't really hold the game back, right? The rest of the game can kind of shine, or it's bad and people didn't like it. Or I saw things like with like skills. The specifics of the gameplay, by the way, I saw some that talk about there's like forced encounters that they're not a fan of. There's some enemies that do like stun locking things that they're not a fan of. And then there's some sort of like skills system, like, I don't know, some way of progressing her combat ability that's just not really deep, like, at all. So those are some of like the actual specifics of the gameplay. But none of them really did I see that said, okay, well, the gameplay is so bad that it ruined the entire game. I didn't really see that. And I think that's just up to the person. Now, you might be like that, right? You might say, well, I can't let that go. The gameplay is just so bad it ruins the whole game. I'm sure there's going to be some people like that. I just didn't see that from the reviews that I read. So overall, I'm really impressed. This is really, to be honest, it passes the eye test. These are all at least if you watch my videos, we've been talking about this, you and I, for quite a while, for multiple months. So I feel pretty good about this, and I'm ready to freaking go. I'll be playing the game in just maybe a day or so. I'm going to do the deluxe edition, and then we'll see how it goes, and I'll do videos and reviews and all that jazz over the coming days. Let me know what you think. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.